Lightning lit up the sky, but it was the eyes in the woods that froze Clara's soul. A true crime story so terrifying, you'll check your logs twice. Want to know what happened in that cabin? Like, share, and follow to uncover the chilling truth. True crime. Stormy nights. The air hung heavy with the promise of rain, the kind of oppressive weight that made your skin prickle and your breath catch. It was late July in the small town of Hollow Creek, a place tucked so deep into the folds of upstate New York's rolling hills that it felt like the world had forgotten it. The sky churned with slate-gray clouds, their edges tinged with a sickly yellow, as if the storm itself were a living thing, brooding and restless. For Clara Hensley, a 29-year-old photographer with a penchant for capturing the raw beauty of nature's fury, the approaching tempest was a siren call. She had spent her life chasing storms, her camera a shield against the chaos, her lens a way to make sense of the world's wild edges. But tonight, in the isolated cabin she'd rented on the outskirts of Hollow Creek, the storm would bring something far darker than she'd ever captured on film. Clara had come to Hollow Creek to escape the noise of the city, to find solitude in the wilderness, where she could focus on her latest project, a photo series on the untamed power of summer storms. The cabin, a weathered A-frame with creaking floorboards and a sagging porch, sat alone at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by dense pines that whispered secrets in the wind. It was perfect, remote, quiet, and close enough to the lake to hear the water lapping against the shore on still nights. She'd found the listing online, a steal at $200 for the week, and the owner, a gruff man named Harold, who lived in town, had handed her the keys with a warning. Storms get bad out here. Keep the doors locked. She'd laughed it off, chalking it up to small-town paranoia. Clara was used to being alone, to trusting her instincts. She'd faced down hurricanes and tornadoes. A little thunderstorm didn't scare her. The first night in the cabin was uneventful. Clara unpacked her gear, her Nikon D850, a tripod, a few lenses, and a battered notebook, where she scribbled her thoughts. She spent the evening sipping coffee, watching the sky darken through the cabin's wide front window. The forecast had promised a storm by morning, and she could feel it building, the air thick with electricity. She went to bed early, lulled by the distant rumble of thunder, her dreams filled with flashes of lightning and the sound of rain hammering the earth. She woke to the kind of silence that felt wrong, the kind that pressed against your eardrums and made you question whether you'd gone deaf. It was just past 3 a.m., according to the glowing red numbers on the bedside clock. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but the air was charged, heavy with the scent of ozone and pine. Clara sat up, her heart thudding for no reason she could name. She reached for her phone, but the screen was dark, dead, despite being fully charged when she'd gone to sleep. Frowning, she flicked on the bedside lamp. Nothing. The power was out. Great, she muttered, her voice loud in the oppressive quiet. She swung her legs out of bed, the hardwood cold against her bare feet, and grabbed the flashlight from her bag. Its beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cabin's sparse interior. A lumpy couch, a wood-burning stove, a small kitchen table cluttered with her camera gear. She moved to the window, expecting to see the storm's first signs, but the world outside was still, the trees frozen in place, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the occasional creak of the cabin settling. Clara decided to check the breaker box, which Harold had mentioned was in the basement. She wasn't thrilled about venturing down there. The door to the basement was a heavy slab of wood with a rusted latch tucked behind the kitchen. But she needed light to work, and her laptop's battery wouldn't last forever. She pulled on a hoodie, grabbed her flashlight, and made her way to the kitchen. The basement door groaned as she opened it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into blackness. The air that wafted up was damp, tinged with the musty smell of earth and something sharper, like old metal. She hesitated, her hand gripping the flashlight tightly. "Get it together, Clara," she whispered, forcing herself to take the first step. The stairs creaked under her weight, each one protesting louder than the last. The beam of her flashlight danced across the walls, revealing cobwebs and cracked concrete. At the bottom, she found the breaker box, a rusted metal panel bolted to the wall. She flipped the switches, one by one, but nothing happened. The power wasn't coming back.
As she turned to head back upstairs, a sound stopped her cold. A faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers drumming on wood. It was coming from the far corner of the basement, where the flashlight's beam didn't quite reach. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling, despite her best efforts to sound brave. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Clara's instincts screamed at her to run, but her curiosity, the same reckless impulse that had driven her to chase storms across the country, kept her rooted in place. She swung the flashlight toward the sound, her heart pounding. The beam caught a glimpse of something, a shape low to the ground, moving just beyond the edge of the light. It was too quick, too fleeting to make out, but it was enough to send a jolt of fear through her. She backed toward the stairs, her eyes fixed on the darkness, when the tapping started again. Faster this time, more insistent. She didn't wait to find out what it was. She bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind her and shoving a chair under the handle for good measure. Her hands were shaking as she stood in the kitchen, the flashlight beam jittering across the room. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the silence louder than ever. She told herself it was nothing. An animal, maybe, or the house settling in the storm's prelude. But the fear lingered, a cold knot in her stomach. Clara spent the rest of the night on the couch, her flashlight clutched like a lifeline, her camera forgotten on the table. She didn't sleep, her eyes darting to the windows every time a shadow moved. When dawn finally broke, gray and heavy with clouds, she felt a flicker of relief. The storm was coming, but daylight made everything seem less sinister. She checked her phone again, still dead, and decided to drive into town to report the power outage. Hollow Creek was only a 15-minute drive, and Harold would know what to do. The road to town was a winding ribbon of gravel, flanked by towering pines that blocked out most of the light. Clara's old Jeep rattled along, the radio spitting static no matter which station she tried. The sky was a bruise, the air thick with the scent of rain.
She sped up, her heart racing. Just a hiker, she told herself. But the words felt hollow. The figure's stillness, its eerie immobility, stayed with her as she drove into Hollow Creek. The town was little more than a gas station, a diner, and a cluster of shops, all huddled under the weight of the coming storm. She found Harold at the hardware store, tinkering with the display of fishing lures. "Power's out at the cabin," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And my phone's dead. I don't know what's going on." Harold frowned, his weathered face creasing. "Storm probably knocked out a line. I'll call the utility company, but it might take a day or two." "You got a generator?" Clara shook her head. "Number N? I saw someone on the road, standing in the woods. They didn't move, just watched me." His eyes narrowed. "Probably a hunter. Folks get weird out here sometimes. Stay in town if you're spooked. Got a motel down the road." Clara forced a smile. "I'll be fine. Just get the power back on." She bought a pack of batteries and a cheap, prepaid phone at the gas station, then headed back to the cabin. The figure was gone when she passed the spot on the road, but the unease lingered. She spent the day organizing her photos, trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the basement, to the tapping, to the shape in the woods. By late afternoon, the storm arrived with a vengeance, rain lashing the cabin and thunder shaking the walls. Clara sat by the window, her camera in hand, snapping shots of the lightning as it tore across the sky. The flashes illuminated the trees, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was just past 9 p.m. when she heard it. A knock at the door. Not a polite tap, but a heavy, deliberate thud, like someone was testing the wood's strength. Clara froze, her camera slipping from her hands. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice, low and rough, muffled by the rain. "Hello? I need help. Car broke down." Her first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend she wasn't there. But the voice called again, more insistent. "Please, I'm soaked out here. Just need a phone." Clara's mind raced. She didn't have a working phone. Not really. The prepaid one had no signal in the storm. She grabbed her flashlight and moved to the door, keeping her body pressed against the wall. "Who's there?" she called, her voice sharper than she intended. "Name's Tom," the voice replied. "Got caught in the storm. Please, I just need to call for a tow." She hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Every instinct told her not to open it. But the idea of leaving someone stranded in the storm felt wrong too. She cracked the door an inch, keeping the chain lock in place, and shone her flashlight through the gap. The man was tall, his face obscured by the hood of a rain-soaked jacket. His hands were in his pockets, his posture tense. "Can you step back?" she said. "I'll pass you the phone." He didn't move. "Can I come in?" "Just for a minute?" The hair on the back of her neck stood up. "Number, step back, or I'm not helping you." For a moment, he didn't respond, just stood there, the rain drumming against his jacket. Then he took a step back, and Clara slid the prepaid phone through the gap, her heart pounding. "There's no signal right now," she said. "Try again later." He took the phone, his fingers brushing hers through the crack in the door. They were cold, almost icy, and she yanked her hand back. "Thanks," he muttered, turning away. She slammed the door shut, locking it and sliding a chair under the handle for good measure. She watched through the window as he disappeared into the rain his silhouette swallowed by the storm. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch, her flashlight and a kitchen knife within reach, listening to the storm rage outside. The knocking didn't come again, but the unease grew, a creeping dread that settled in her bones. She kept replaying the man's voice, the way he'd stood too still, the coldness of his touch. Something about him felt wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world sodden and grey. Clara checked the porch for the phone, but it was gone. She drove into town again, her nerves frayed, and found Harold at the hardware store. "Did the utility company fix the power?" she asked. He shook his head. "They checked the lines. Nothing's down. Power should be fine at the cabin." Clara's stomach dropped. "What? It's been out since last night." Harold's eyes narrowed. "You sure? I can come by and check the breaker." She nodded, her unease growing. "And there was a guy last night. Said his car broke down. Asked to use my phone." Harold's face darkened. "What did he look like?" "I didn't get a good look. Tall, wore a hood. Said his name was Tom." Harold didn't respond right away, his gaze drifting to the window. "Ain't no Tom lives around here," he said finally. She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't an idiot, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she followed him upstairs, where he checked the locks and windows, his movements methodical but tense. "You see that guy again, you call me," he said before leaving. "And keep the doors locked." Clara spent the day trying to focus on her photos, but the cabin felt different now, like it was watching her. She kept her knife close, her flashlight charged, her camera abandoned. That night, she double-checked every lock, wedged chairs under the doors, and sat up with the lights on, listening to the silence. The storm was gone, but the air still felt heavy, charged with something she couldn't name. Around 2 a.m., she heard it. A faint tapping, like fingers on glass. It was coming from the back window, the one facing the woods. She grabbed her knife and flashlight, her heart hammering. The tapping stopped, then started again, deliberate and slow. She crept to the window, keeping low, and peeked through the gap in the curtains. A face stared back at her, pale, gaunt, with eyes that seemed too large, too dark, like pools of ink. It wasn't the man from the night before. This was someone else. Someone who didn't look entirely human. Clara stumbled back, her breath coming in short gasps. The tapping turned to scratching, a sound that set her teeth on edge. She ran to the bedroom, barricading the door with a dresser, and dialed Harold's number on the prepaid phone, praying for a signal. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She tried again, her hands shaking, but the call wouldn't connect. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low, guttural hum, like someone chanting under their breath. It was coming from outside, circling the cabin, moving from window to window. Clara clutched the knife, her mind racing. She couldn't stay here, couldn't wait for whoever or whatever was out there to get in. She grabbed her keys, her flashlight, and the knife, and made for the front door. If she could get to the jeep, she could drive to town, find help. She yanked the door open, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. The humming stopped, and for a moment, the world was silent. Then she saw them. 3 figures standing at the edge of the woods, their pale clothes glowing faintly in the moonlight. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her with those 2 large eyes. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figures took a step forward, then another, their movements jerky, like puppets on strings. She didn't think. She ran, sprinting for the jeep, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly. She fumbled with the keys, her hands slick with sweat, and threw herself into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and she slammed the gas, the tires spinning on the wet gravel. She glanced in the rear-view mirror as she sped down the road, expecting to see the figures chasing her. But the road was empty, the woods silent. She didn't stop until she reached the motel in Hollow Creek, her heart still pounding. The clerk, a bored teenager, barely looked up as she checked in. Clara locked herself in the room, the knife still in her hand, and sat on the bed, staring at the door. She didn't sleep, didn't move, just waited for dawn. The next morning, she went to the police station, a small building next to the diner. The officer, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, listened to her story, his expression unreadable. "You're not the first to see things out at that cabin," he said when she finished. "Folks have been reporting strange stuff for years. Lights in the woods, noises, people who ain't there when you look twice. We've checked it out, never found nothing." Clara's stomach twisted. "What do you mean, strange stuff?" He shrugged. "Old town, old stories. Some say the land's cursed, others say it's just kids messing around. You want us to check the cabin?" She nodded, her throat tight. The officer drove her back, his partner following in a second car. The cabin looked normal in the daylight, the windows glinting in the sun, the woods quiet. They searched the place, top to bottom, but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, no trace of the figures she'd seen. The officer gave her a skeptical look as they left, but she didn't care. She packed her things, left the keys on the table, and drove out of Hollow Creek, vowing never to return. Back in the city, Clara tried to move on, to lose herself in her work. But the storm followed her, not in the sky, but in her mind. She saw those figures in every shadow, heard that humming in every quiet moment. Her photos from the cabin were corrupted, every file showing nothing but static, except for one, a single image of the woods, with 3 pale shapes standing just beyond the trees, their eyes glowing like embers. She deleted the photo, burned the memory card, and swore off storm chasing for good. But some nights, when the rain beat against her apartment windows, she could still hear the tapping, the humming, the sound of something waiting just outside.